Decorative trim is ornamental fabric decoration used for embellishing projects. It can come in a variety of styles and widths. This video will cover the different types and basic tips in sewing with them. Here are a few examples of decorative trim you may find at your local fabric store. It can come either by the yard or pre-packaged. When picking a trim, check the content and care instructions. If your trim is made from natural fibers like 100% cotton, you may want to pre-treat it to take care of shrinking before sewing. Also, by checking the care instructions, you'll know if it can be pressed. For something like a satin ribbon, you may want to get out creases or wrinkles with steam rather than pressing directly on it. When pinning your trim to your fabric, you can use pins, but there may be cases where you don't want to use pins, like with satin ribbon, because they might cause holes. Other options are fabric clips or fabric tape. When sewing trim on your sewing machine, use a new needle. You don't want to create a snag in your trim because your needle is old. If your trim is a different color than your fabric, you may match your upper and bobbin threads to your trim. You may also want to change your stitch length to a slightly longer one. So instead of a 2.5 stitch length, I may use a 3 or a 3.5 stitch length for thicker trim. Decorative trims usually fall into 3 categories: edge trim, rectangular trim, and novelty trim. Edge trim typically has one flat, straight side to make it easy for sewing. You'll see this with ruffles, lace, and fringe trims. It's ideal for using on hems. When adding it to a hem, it can either go under the hem's edge or on top, depending on the look you want. To add it to the top of the hem your project first using your preferred method. Then lay your trim on the right side and pin into place. Stitch in place along the top edge of the trim. To add it under the hem, you'll be attaching it before the hem is created. First, do a basting stitch at the hemline, so minus whatever your hem allowance is. Next, pin the straight edge of the trim to the basting stitch with the right side of the trim to the right side of the fabric. Your trim should be upside down. Stitch through the straight edge, then turn your hem allowance under and hem with your preferred method, either by machine or by hand sewing. Rectangular trim has 2 straight edges. Some examples would be ribbon, braid, and lace. These types of trims are great for insets and for sewing on top of fabric, like for edging. If your trim is not very wide, you can place it on the fabric where you want and stitch down the center of the trim. For wider trim, you should sew on each long edge. If you want to make it look like an inset trim with no fabric behind it, start by sewing on each long edge of the trim where you want it on your fabric. Next, cut down the center of the fabric behind the trim, being careful not to cut your trim. If your fabric frays, finish the raw edge on each side of the cut fabric. Fold back each side so it's under the fabric and not the trim, and then on the right side, top stitch on each side. This technique is pretty and doesn't require any pattern or garment alteration, but works best on wider trim so it's easier to manage. Decorative novelty trim is trim that doesn't fall in the previous 2 categories. It could be rosettes, beads, or chain trim. Depending on the trim, these might be easier to hand sew into place rather than try to machine sew, as it may require a special foot or not be possible. How you sew on novelty trim is going to be completely up to you and may vary since there's so many different variations of novelty trim. For my particular case, I'm going to use a hand blanket stitch to sew it on, and you can see I've already started right there. Now I'm using a bright orange thread just so it'll stand out for you to be easier to see, but obviously you want to use a matching color thread. I've already started this, and for my blanket stitch, I'm going into my fabric next to my trim. I'm finding a place to come out that's not too far away. And you'll see that I didn't pull my thread all the way through because I'm going to have my needle go through this loop of thread here and then pull it as I'm coming all the way out. So there's one stitch. So now I'm going to do it again. I'm going to go into my fabric at some place on my trim and then come out. And all we're doing is just securing our trim at different points. I have my little fabric loop here and I'm going through that with my needle and then pulling it. And the first part of this may look a little loose, but as soon as you do more stitches, it'll start to tighten it up. So now I'm going to go down through the fabric, up on the other side of this little piece of trim here, going through my fabric loop, and then pulling it. So then I'm going to go down through my fabric, up through the fabric loop. And again, this is called a blanket stitch. Using trim is a great way to embellish your projects and makes them extra special. To see specific tutorials on some other trims, see our videos for fringe, piping, bias tape, and rickrack. We hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Please subscribe and click the bell icon to get notified of our new releases. Also check out ProfessorPincushion.com to view our complete library with well over 450 sewing tutorials. If you would like to directly support us, you can join our YouTube membership and earn some exclusive perks. Thanks for watching!